welcome to today's webinar, Bridging the Achievement Gap with Limited Resources with Cord Carter and Benjamin Bowles. Before we start, I would like to share some practical information with all of you. So throughout the webinar, we have some interactive polls and Q&A at the end of the webinar. And to participate, I would like to ask you to open another tab in your browser and open up slido.com/Labster. Also, the webinar will be recorded, and everyone who registered will also receive a recording to the email they're registered with. Last but not least, you will all be able to send follow-up questions that you maybe think of after the webinar to marketing@labster.com so we can get them answered. And also Cord will share his email address later on as well if you have direct questions for him. To make sure that everyone feels comfortable with using Slido, we have our first poll question here. And again, please go to slido.com/Labster and answer these poll questions. So where are you joining from? Oh, New York.
Wow.
Yes. Give you a bit more time to get familiar with the Slido. Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So again, slido.com/Labster, and then you should see definitely the question there. Oh.
More coming in. Tennessee,
Wow.
good.
Hey, okay. St. Louis.
Vermont too, excellent.
Okay. Oh, Missouri. Wow.
St. Louis
Missouri.
and non-St. Louis. Dallas.
Oh, Dallas. Awesome. Okay. Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
All right.
So yeah, we see that people feel more comfortable with using Slido, so definitely stay there so you can attend also the other poll questions, and also feel free to type in every question you have. We will answer them at the end of this webinar. So yeah, but that being done, Ben, I would like to give it up to you.
Thanks so much, Julia. Appreciate it, and appreciate everyone entering where you're coming from in Slido there. As Julia had mentioned, Slido is one of the ways that we like to communicate and stay interactive with webinars. So future questions can go in there, not just that you have for us, but that we'll have for you. We'll continue to interact with Slido throughout the rest of this webinar. The reason we're all here today, you saw the title, you registered for this. We're talking about bridging the achievement gap with limited resources. My name is Ben Bowles. I work as a Regional Director of Scientific Partnerships here at Labster. What that means is I work with higher ed partners in the states of Tennessee and South Carolina, helping them find new ways to integrate active learning into their classrooms. Labster is one of those solutions. Cord and I had met each other first time a year ago when the pandemic first hit, and we were discussing this summer about how the last year had gone, and had some incredible stories to share, some incredible creativity, some great results from students. And I knew right away, more people need to hear this story, more people need to hear the success stories and some of the amazing things that were able to come out of this last year. So there's some great results here. You can see Cord's information. I'm gonna allow Cord to introduce himself, and then we're gonna dive in right after that on some slides with some of the results that we did see.
Thanks, Ben. Welcome everyone that's joined this today's webinar. My name is Cord Carter. I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I was born and raised there. And I went on to get my undergrad at Colorado State College in Potter, Oklahoma. And then I went and transferred to Southeastern Oklahoma State University, where in 2014, I received my bachelor's in chemistry and double minor in mathematics and biology. And then I went on to D. Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. Thank you for coming from Jackson, Mississippi, where I got my master's in chemistry. And then I went on to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences, where I also got my master's in pharmaceutical sciences. And what this webinar today will be talking about is my year and a half tenure at Fisk University, which is a private institution in Nashville, Tennessee, historical Black college and university, where I worked as a lecturer in chemistry and a lab manager in the Department of Life and Physical Sciences.
Absolutely. Thanks for introducing yourself there, Cord. As you mentioned, a lot of this is going to be focused based on that time where we had some student data prior to COVID. We have some student data during the period when everything was different. And I think we're going to dive in here. Cord, you know this best. You were teaching this. You were on the ground. I'm going to let you walk us through this.
Yes. If you can go to the next slide. So in the fall 2019, before the pandemic, during this time when I came to, before I came to FISC, I realized the data that I saw in the final average exam grades was based on traditional lectures, where it's based on just lecturing the whole time. And as you can see on the slide, on the percent of the exam grades in 2019 was 67%. But after after doing some researching and met Ben, we were able to use Labster in fall 2020. As you can see on the right, in the fall 2020, by using Labster, we increased our exam grades by 9% to 73%. So I'm so happy about the results here. And then in the next slide, I'll talk about the final course grades. So in the fall 2019, the final course grade was 32%, which is based on, once again, on the traditional lecturing, where the students are just going to the class, just learning the gain knowledge, and they went out with the 32%. But when we used Labster, we saw a really big improvement from 72% to 85% by using Labster, because Labster is more of a connecting the dots, so to speak, and it gives students the opportunity to understand why they learn all this information to real-world application, which I will talk more in the webinar. So I'm just extremely excited for the work that I've done at FISC and my fellow colleagues as well. So if you got questions, just ask away in the Q&A session.
Absolutely. So that was we heard those data, we heard some other stories, and we knew that seeing such great improvement from students. There was some other stories too we're going to talk about, and Cord had some creativity, as he mentioned, not just in finding new ways to deliver instruction, but in tools and how he used them, and we're going to dive into that. But before we do, we like to get a little baseline here and just start out, before you even stepped foot in Nashville on the campus, at one point you decided, I'm going to be a chemist, I'm going to move forward and you decided that you were going to go ahead and become a chemist. Now on FISC's campus, we discussed how maybe there was a bit, you've described as under-resourced. We're going to dive into that, but before we do, we want to know from our listeners at home that are part of the webinar, we want to get an idea of your course, your host institution. How large is the enrollment there? We're talking about using limited resources. What kind of resources are you coming in with? So we have a poll here to share. How many students, what does the enrollment look like at your university or your college?
I have to apologize. It seems like Slido is not working right now. So maybe we can bring that up at the end. And
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
We can visit that later then as to how many students.
Okay.
We'll discuss what it looks like at FISC then. So we are starting out, you becoming a chemist. How did that start? What was that story, Cord?
Sure. I would love to share this story about how I became a chemist. Like I shared in my introduction, I'm from a small rural community called Tom in Tom, Oklahoma, and I was at a place where I tried to. Both my parents was not STEM majors, and so I would just want to know like what I want to do with my life, like how can I change lives? And so to be funny, Ben, I was wanting to be a mathematician in the beginning because I love math. I love math. I know a lot of people in the audience may strongly dislike math, but that's okay. So I would like to thank my mom because on my birthday she bought me a science magazine, and I was so fascinated with all the science behind it and the discoveries that was found in this magazine. And I just want to understand, how does this work? How does the biology works in science? So when I got into high school, I took a biology course, and I and how it was taught, it was no math. It was just all memorization. And I said, nah, that's not for me. And so as a junior, I met Mr. Ricky Alford from my high school, Hayward High School, where he was teaching advanced placement chemistry. And I really was excited for the chemistry because it was both science and math together. And how complex and how things work really draw me into being a chemist. And just to realize too that there was not that many people that looked like me that was a chemist. And just seeing how people have the stereotype that chemistry is difficult. So I just wanted to change the narrative into being a chemist, not just to be a scientist, but also be an educator, to inspire and motivate more people to pursue chemistry as a major, as a career.
Yeah, I love that part there. I think a lot of us can think back to somebody who told us you can do it and make it happen, and that was moms are always part of the equation, of course, but having the educator in the classroom that's going to be there and inspire you. For yourself, what do you find is more important? Is it the chemistry and being a scientist and being in the lab, or is it being the teacher and being on the educator side?
Yeah, this is a great question. I was thinking about this several times in my life. Like, what's more important to me? And I would say being in the lab, being a scientist, is discovering new novel therapeutics to treat like cancers and different infectious diseases, and be able to invest the science field. But I would say that what's most important to me is being a teacher, because again, the opportunity to educate, motivate, and inspire new generations of STEM and non-STEM majors to pursue what they always want to dream, and be able to share your passion in the classroom, and be able to share your experience, your life experiences, to see that to have the college students to see like, wow, I can do it. If he sees that I can do it, I want to do it. I want to work hard. I want to be able to compete at a high level to where I don't have to be limited, but go beyond my potential.
Yeah. So it sounds like an important part there is that the passing on, the sharing with the next generation that sparks so much of what you do. Well, I appreciate some of the background there. I'm sure I could go into some of my background. I certainly had educators that have done the same thing. And all of us, I'm sure all of us that are here in this discussion today are educators and could probably share something similar. Now, going into some of the more specifics, the more nitty gritty, talking about how this actually happened, we talked about how many students, what kind of resources we have. Going into how limited this was or wasn't, I understand Fisk is a smaller university. What does the enrollment look like at Fisk?
So the enrollment at Fisk, so we are a more predominant undergraduate institution with some master's programs, and there's about a little over 1,000 students that's enrolled at the university. And we have some in my department that I mentioned earlier with the Department of Life Physical Sciences. I was fortunate enough to be working in the chemistry discipline, where it was housed with 4 faculty. With so it was a great opportunity to work with them.
Yeah, a small but mighty group to serve about 1,000 students. You're saying?
Yes, yes, sir.
Earlier, when we discussed, however long ago that was, you had used the word under-resourced to describe Fisk. Can you describe what kind of resources you were working with back in March when everything first happened? You had a limited pool that you were looking at. What were you working with? What tools did you have?
Yes, so in my discipline, we didn't have like the uh, certain technologies and equipment that our larger counterparts have. Like we have benchtop NMR, which is not, it doesn't have a really low resolution to where we can show students like how proteins are interacting in the cell, and not having students be able to see bigger drug molecules as well. We had a gas chromatography mass spec and a liquid chromatography mass spec as well, and we had UV-Vis and the atomic absorption spectrometry. But the problem was we didn't, a lot of it wasn't up to date, and so it caused us to not be able to utilize it and allow students to use those tools to be able to discover and learn how what they learn in the classroom, how it can be practical to their real world applications.
Yeah, so it sounds like that you had the equipment, but it wasn't always relevant. What was accessibility to that equipment looking like for the students? I imagine it's hard to schedule to get students all on that equipment. Or are any students missing out? Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, I can. So in the fall, in the spring 2020, before the pandemic, the only equipment we were able to utilize was the ultraviolet visible spectrophotometer,
Hmm.
where we was working on looking at the Beer's law equation and based on concentrations and seeing like the different reactions, and that's the only time that the students were able to actually use a particular equipment that is utilized in not just only in chemistry but also different STEM fields. And so really the students wasn't getting the opportunity to look at different instrumentations through my tenure at the university.
Yeah, and so that was the only piece of equipment that you were able to have access to. What's the kind of the impact of not having those resources? Just digging a little deeper here. Did students have a harder time understanding things because they couldn't get in the lab, or how did that impact their learning?
So it actually impacted their learning a lot because of course you have it's great to have knowledge, right? But the biggest problem is how can you apply the knowledge into real world application like social injustice, environmental issues, and public health, and how can you utilize them? And for students not getting an opportunity to see firsthand how to use different techniques and instrumentation, it doesn't give the students the ability to practice what they learn in the classroom.
Hmm. Yeah, and so they're losing that application, seeing how it can actually not just having knowledge, but using it as a tool and going out and interacting with the world. Yeah. You also you mentioned before the size of the department. You mentioned you were small but mighty. How many faculty members did you have?
So in my discipline in chemistry, we only have 4 faculty, and then me as a laboratory manager and a lecturer. So it was
Yeah.
pretty much only 4 faculty, all in over 100 STEM students that's taking chemistry classes from general chem to organic and analytical and physical chem.
Yeah. Well, good news is there is not hard to get everyone in the same room and get on the same page. Ideally, not in the last year, of course. We were not in the same room, but well, that was the playground. That's what we were working with. Those were our tools. Julia, is Slido, do we have that up and running yet? We're going to ask the viewers here what kind of resources they have in their labs.
Okay, let's see. No, it's still not working.
Doesn't look like it's not.
Let me quickly unshare my screen, fix it, and share it again. Keep talking. Sure. Very interesting, but it's very important that we get the audience to attend. So.
Yeah, and here what we're looking for, the question here is around what kind of resources you're working with, what's most under-resourced. We discussed lab equipment, we discussed faculty, we discussed access to that lab equipment. We're all going to run into different challenges. We're all going to have different limits on what we can and cannot do. And seeing those limits and seeing what we can do within them is so critical. And that's why we're soliciting your feedback here, is to see what are you working with? Is your simulation situation similar to what Cord was running into at Fisk, or maybe you ran into other challenges. Maybe you had other limitations that weren't included on there. Let's see if we're able to get this going again.
Okay.
And Cord, I know we're going to be going into how you overcome those limitations in a little bit and going there. Discussing those faculty, discussing some of those limitations. So is there some other things that we haven't discussed so far in terms of not just lab equipment, but just general part of the science education process? There's some other things that maybe you wish you had when you were at Fisk or previously in education that you didn't have access to?
I think the one thing that was a challenge was also the budget, the departmental budget. So when students come to Fisk University, per student per academic year, they only pay $67, and for the lab supplies, equipment, and it's very difficult to know like where the money was implemented to for each discipline. So there's 4 disciplines in the Department of Life and Physical Sciences. So the department itself didn't know like what the percent of the funds are going to what department. So it was very difficult to know like how much we have in our budget at times.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that will resonate with everyone working in higher education, working in academia. We're always asking like, where's the budget? Where's the funding for this? So certainly. Julia, are you able to pull that up, or should we go on to the next topic here?
So it looks like it's working again.
Nice.
All right.
So let me reshare my screen. And we can also start with our first poll question as well, if you two want.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
That first poll question, that was how large the enrollment at the university is, right?
Okay.
Wow.
Oh, look at that.
If you see my screen.
Oh my goodness. Wow, look at the percent.
So we got 3 responders there.
4, Ben.
We'll see if there's an opportunity here for a couple more to respond to. But it sounds right around 1,000 student range was about what you were working with, Cord, maybe that 1,000 to 3,000 overall. But that's a similar size.
Okay. Oh,
Okay.
wow. So we got a little over 3,000 to 7,000. Okay. Wow.
So we have no one over 7,000 here, at least now that's responded. That was, and I see this in the institution I went to. Rensselaer was around 6,000 to 7,000 students, and so I see that more than 7,000. I always used to think that we were a small school, and then I left and I realized, wow, I had it a lot better than I thought I did when I was a student.
Yeah, so I would say all the schools I attended were really small. So I think the biggest was a little over 9,000 at Jackson State. So
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's probably good. We can go to the next question here. When we're looking at resources, whether it be time, money, personnel, equipment, what resources are the most limited? What is the most restrictive for you listeners at home that are taking part in this? What's the biggest constraint when you're trying to go and do science education? It looks like somebody selected all of them. I think that's what we're seeing here. Maybe everything other than lab supplies for some folks here. I see that as a response, and that tells me that there's restrictions from more than one place, that we're asking of our educators to do so much with limiting access to support, to have the proper time, to have the proper budgets, to have the proper equipment, to get done what they know needs to get done. That's what I'm seeing out of this poll right now. Lab equipment just took the lead here, but overall, it looks like there's a similar story here, as we're all trying to find a way to make the most out of the resources we have and still deliver a quality experience that's going to help the next generation of scientists.
That's what I'm seeing here. Wow, the 60% for laboratory equipment.
Yeah.
Me and you, 60%. We relate very well.
All right. Well, looking at these limitations then that we've discussed and that we see here, we want to get into some of the ways that you're able to overcome those limitations. You're certainly within them, but how do you make the most of that? Talking about, we first began our conversations last March, and you brought on Use Labster. What are some of the ways that you use Labster creatively? I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the platform. How did you use it in maybe a different way than others might expect?
Oh, sure. So I can share a little bit about some ways that I was able to overcome those limitations for the first question.
Yeah.
Before I met Ben, what we did, what I did for the experiments in general chemistry 2, what I did was when I came to class, I actually, before we even do anything, I asked the student a question. Like the freezing point, the depression lab. I asked them, have you ever used antifreeze in your car before? And some of the students did not know what I was talking about. And so I had to explain to them. I said, well, if you're from the north, like Chicago or New York or any of the northeast regions, you'll know that if you use there's a reason why we use the antifreeze in our daily life in our cars, is because when you antifreeze in your car, it helps your engine to stay maintainable during the winter and also in the summer months. And when the students heard me explain that, they was like, "Whoa, I did not know that." And so I start explaining the science behind what the chemical that's causing that's in the antifreeze, and the student was so impressed, and they were able, when they went to the lab, they looked at the freezing point of water and sugar and salts, and also they looked at made different concentrations of antifreeze and seeing and predicting what the freezing point at different concentrations. And so getting them to be able to see how that works, and then also use green chemistry perspectives, students were able to see how is environmentally safe and how to properly store the chemical waste. And also during the pandemic, I remember when we were doing the Beers Laws lab, the students were really struggling with the math. And so what I did was I drove all the way from my house in Brentwood, Tennessee, and went to Fisk, and told the students that, hey guys, what time you guys are available? And we created a group meet text system where students can ask me all kind of questions during the pandemic, and students were telling me their availability. So I drove to campus and I was showing them how to do the ice table with the different concentrations. And instead of me just talking the whole time, I called students to interact and ask them questions to see where they're at, to see if they can understand. So there's times that you may have students that eat the steak different. And so I was learning which student understand what way. And so I asked them, like, what do you understand? What's tripping you up? And students are able to explain. And I say, that's right what you're saying, but let me ask you this question. And so that way it helps students redirect them right back in the narrow path to the answer. And the student really appreciate that perspective. And now some creative things that I use when I was teaching Labster, I use different approaches with the Labster. So in my natural science course, which we'll talk about later, one of the things that I use is, yes, the students learning all the different types of science like physics, chemistry, biology, earth science, and just and using Labster, they are able to look at the different uh, subjects, those different topics in the course, and able to see how does this while learning lecture connects to real world applications. And when they came back to class, they was like, "Cord, I learned, I remember this stuff," and they were able to explain some things. There were some times that the students were correcting me in the lecture. So so it was just really inspiring to the point where I had a student that reached out to me during the class and went to the science museum and said, "Oh, man, Mr. Carter, I remember the electromagnetic spectrum," and they were able to explain it to the tour guide, and it was just a remarkable experiences that I had at Fisk. And I would like to share about how I use the Labster quiz questions. So it actually happened this summer when I was teaching experiments in geochemistry too, this for summer 2021 semester.
And I'll jump in to make sure everyone here is aware of the quiz questions. Throughout the simulation, students are getting asked multiple choice quiz questions, along the way checkpointing their understanding. And Cord took that not just as a standalone experience, but said, I need to make sure students are getting asked this again. So rather than just having it be a standalone assessment, he did more with it. So that's what he's going to jump in more here.
Thank you. Yes. I really appreciate the Labster because what the cool thing about Labster is for the faculty that's out watching this webinar, they actually have like the quiz questions that's also being used in the simulations as well as the theory and then the lab manual as well. And so what I did this summer, instead of letting having students do the simulation and answer the questions there, I actually took the same questions, but this time I asked the students to discuss how they approach those questions, how they answer the question. So that way I can see where they're at. And you can see there's two of my summer students that result from using Labster that worked in my lab this summer, and then they still working in my research lab today while I'm at Texas. So it's just a marvelous opportunity to, train future students into research, whether it's medical school, pharmacy, whatever the case may be. And to go back to what I was sharing about the quiz questions, when I had the students answer those questions and explain what their rationale was, it allowed me to see where they're at. So that way I can help them see where where they have a lack of comprehension to bring them to where they have a full comprehension of the material. And so when the students did that, they were very excited with the feedback, and they came and approached me and asked me more questions to where we had full-blown conversations about the course.
Yeah. Out of everything you just talked about there of being creative with limited resources, I think I heard two key themes there. The second one that you just mentioned, having the conversation with students, meeting them where they're at, downloading GroupMe and learning how to use maybe a new software for you was another example of maybe students don't like to log into Blackboard or Canvas or wherever it is. And if we just tell them to and they don't, we're missing out on an opportunity to actually help those students with where they are. And so I heard a lot of that creativity was having a conscientiousness around what do students care about, where are they in the learning process, and how can I make sure that they're seeing how this applies. And that was the second part of how this applies, the real world application. You talked about the antifreeze. You talked about in Labster some of the questions that we're asking, but not just asking them what's the answer, but why is that answer? Help them apply the concepts and really have a rigorous testing of, do you understand this? How does it apply? I really appreciate that. And what I think was really key there is that both of those options are free. It's not required to ask students a real world application or bring it in. It just requires that presence of mind to recognize how does this help students and where they are. Also, I love this picture of you in the lab, just going to town and in action here. So with helping those students Labster, we mentioned, was a part of it, but this is all to serve a greater purpose. When you're starting a new class for your students, when you're entering in the first time, what's the most important thing for your students to be getting out of that class?
The most important thing to get out of class is how does this what they learn in class apply to their lives. So when you come into class, when I think about when I prepare the class, I always think, where are these students coming from? And so I have to put myself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from, and learning what can I do to help students not just have the knowledge stick, but also how can they use it to apply, inspire, motivate, encourage others that's before them and those that's in front of them to pursue STEM, and also make an impact in their communities. And so also I love that that students will be able to educate one another, to help them to understand the material better, to where at the end the outcome of the course was would have students talk about science, talk about technology, engineering, mathematics, and be able to communicate that with other students, as well as be able to apply what they learn in the classroom into research, which you've seen with my 2 summer students that worked in my lab while we were working on marine natural products.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. That comes down to, I think, also what we've been talking this whole time about helping those students get where they want to be, study what they want to study. We have a question here about making students make connections between learning in class and the real world. I feel like we've touched on that, and I want to stay on track on time here and give you opportunity. You talked a lot about the differences in your classes, especially when your approach to the natural sciences course you discussed. Tell me more about some of the different ways that you use labs or maybe other tools in natural sciences versus the general chemistry course you taught.
Yeah. So what I did with with my natural science course in the fall 2020, what I did was when the students so I use a team-based teaching pedagogy where when students before students come, they actually look over the lectures on their own, and I put some notes to it to help students understand. And what I do encourage students to do is do some discovery. So for me, being a chemist, I love to discover new things. And in order to discover new things, you have to do some research and see what's been known about it, what's the context, what's the purpose of what you're learning. And it calls students to really dig in, to really understand the material a lot more. And I couple it with Labster, where what the student learn in the lecture, they also can see it in the lab as well, to see like, wow, okay, now I understand what you're saying in the lecture based on what I'm seeing in the Labster simulation. Because what the beauty of the Labster simulation is that when you get into Labster, they have like a theory tab where it gives you some details. And I love how Labster tells stories, because when you tell a story and you're trying to find an answer, you want to seek it out. And it's marvelous just to have students tie those two together, to where when they come to the class, they take in the individual readiness assurance test, where students take the quiz of what they learned in the lecture. And when they come, after they finish, they get into their groups and they look at the same quiz. But this time the students are doing more interactions where they talking amongst each other. And I remember one time, I would like to share this story with you, Ben. There was one time we were on Zoom, and I was going through the different breakout rooms, and the student said, "Hey, before you leave, I have a question for you." And apparently the question had 2 answers, and the students explained why they picked this answer over the answer I chose. And it was just so marvelous that I gave them credit, because they were able to explain how they got the answer and be able to say, okay, based on what I learned at Lobster, and they actually have references, actual references with them to validate their answer. And So overall, it just really put a big smile on my face to see students that really encouraged to discover and learn new things on their own
Yeah.
time.
And isn't that just science in action? Is to have a question in front of you, try to find an answer, and then go and get the resources, and to see that at an introductory level. I can see how that put a smile on your face. So that'd be really heartwarming to see that happening so early on in the science education career. We haven't gotten to this yet, and there's kind of, we talked a lot about how we're helping these students, introducing active learning in the classroom. Something else that's very important is STEM education as a whole. There are plenty of stereotypes and unhelpful beliefs that just need to be debunked. There's been a paper, I think it was the UW, University of Washington, looking at underrepresented minority students in general chemistry courses, finding students who had a C or a lower just left STEM, changed different majors, or maybe even left college because they felt they weren't capable of succeeding or being successful. They lacked that motivation to carry them through some of those really hard times when you're studying STEM. For your own personal experience, you talked a bit about your teacher, but how have you disproven that stereotype in STEM education and STEM?
So yes, this is a great question, and I think some in the audience may relate. But I was diagnosed with autism at a very young age, and wasn't able to talk for 3 years. And I just when I started back talking, I had speech impairment issues, and I had doctors, I had people that said he will never succeed in life. He will never be able to graduate high school. He won't never be able to do anything. And when I had the support of my family that prayed for me, that loved me, and they were patient with me, it really drove me to work hard. It drove me to the point where I told my mama and my family, I said, hey, you don't have to worry about paying for me for college, because I feel do whatever it takes. And so when I became a freshman in high school, I ended up going to Choctaw Nation Upper Bound, where it was a college prep program, where over the summer we gone to a college campus, and we take we sit we come to as if we were college students, and it just made me so motivated to go to college. And so I was in individual education program, IPE, for special ed students. And I told the special ed student when I came back that summer, before my sophomore year, I told them, I said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to challenge myself. So I started taking advanced placement courses, and there were some people that said that's a bad idea. They say if you struggle, you can always go back. I said I'm not going back. And so when you have teachers, when you have family members, and when you have mentors, which one of my mentors at the time was my high school math teacher and a pastor at my church, that really encouraged me to continue to work hard, continue to compete. And so I got to the point where when I became a junior and took the advanced placement chemistry class, my chemistry professor was encouraged me. He said, Cord, you should do this curriculum contest. And so I remember the first time I went to a curriculum contest. And for those that don't not familiar, in the state of Oklahoma, we go to different colleges and we compete with other students from across the state of Oklahoma, and we take different subject exams. And I remember the first time I said, I don't think I did well. And the teacher said, that's okay. That's okay. You did great. And so one thing I know, there was somebody that was at the university that I ended up going to at that transfer, which is a funny story. And he said, there's a guy named Cord Carter from Hayward, Oklahoma, got first. And I was like, who? I was like, who? So it gave me a motivation I went to state in chemistry, and I won the state championship in chemistry. So when I saw that, I realized that what I was capable of. So I think having mentors, having a support group, and have teachers and other people in your corner that's telling you can do it really helped me disprove the stereotypes that been told that African Americans are intellectual inferior. And I was able to disprove that this STEM stereotype by the support of my mentors, my teachers, and my community and my family back at home in Tom, Oklahoma.
Yeah, yeah, that's the takeaway you had there of having someone to cheer you on, because there's so many other people that are going to tell you you can't, but having that group that's going to say you can do this and make it happen. I want to hear how you're doing that for the next generation of scientists. So we had a couple questions here. I'm going to consolidate here. Kind of two-part question. The first is, how are you working to help those students bridge we call it sometimes the achievement gap, sometimes the knowledge gap, whatever we might call it in language. How are you helping that next generation of scientists do that? Let's start there. I know Labster is one of the tools. That's why we're together. And I know we have a great story we're going to end on about how you go into doing that in terms of representation. But starting out there.
Oh yes, yes. That's also, this is a great question. So in my natural science course, I remember the first time in fall 2020 where the university asked me to be an adjunct faculty to teach natural science, and I never taught natural science in my entire life, and so having to design the material, and I had some people that taught the class before. They said, "Hey, you can use the syllabus," but before I went approached the class, I said, "Wait a minute, what can I do to help my students that doesn't like STEM because of these stereotypes love STEM like I do?" And so like I mentioned in one of my response to the questions, I use a team-based learning because students that's coming from different background have different style of learning, a different style of attaining the information. And so the first day of class, I shared my journey, how I became to where I am today to my students, because I think there's times that students don't know the faculty. They think that the faculty with PhDs are too intellectually superior in a sense, and so students are uncomfortable asking questions because they feel that they are inferior to the faculty superior. And so what I did was share my story and share a picture of all of my mentors that I had along my journey to show them that I had mentor from that was a Caucasian woman. I had a Hispanic mentor. I had a pastor. I had an Asian mentor as well. So I had like different diversity of mentors in my life that really helped me to where I am today. And sharing my personal journey to help students be comfortable to share their life journeys. And so what I had students to do, I encourage them to share what's your name, what year you are, what's your major, where you're from, what are some fun facts about you, what are some things you want to learn from this class. And I had students that shared from they were the first one to go to college. I had a student that said that they wasn't supposed to be going to college, but they were in college. And I had there was different stories that the students shared. Where I wish I could share, but for the sake of time, I just wanted to keep it short. And after I did that, I did a presentation of different African American achievers in STEM at Fisk University, the first African American to receive a PhD in chemistry, St. Elmo Brady, was one of my heroes that encouraged me to pursue chemistry. And I think having that, sharing different people that that may have bridged for future generations like myself and my students, to help them see like, wow, they did all of this. I did not know that. I didn't know George Washington Carver curated meats, and I did not know that. I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And so I gave my student an assignment to do a two-thirds page to a one-page paper about their African American achievement gap. I mean, achiever in STEM. And
Yeah.
the student that I had some students that were so motivated by my seminar. I mean, by my presentation, they wanted to do 4 to 5 pages. They said, "Hey, Mr. Carter, can I write 4 or 5 pages about my achievement. They were so encouraged. And also what I did was I invited 2 guest lecturers. I had Dr. Tracy Johnson, who is the Dean of Life Sciences at UCLA, that gave her life journey, where she was a non-STEM major, and then when she took organic at UCLA at our undergrad, she decided to be a biology major. So it was that I had those connection with the students, and then I had Dr. Lundette Jones from Maryland, who was was started as homeless. Then she got her bachelor's in chemistry from Morgan State, got her PhD in environmental health sciences at Johns Hopkins, where she was the first African American to receive a PhD in that field. And she shared about her journey to the students. And I think having students see people like them coming from different backgrounds into the classroom and share their personal life journeys really encourage students to love STEM a lot more, to where I had students that want to be a chemistry major. I had students that want to double major in business and psychology and computer science. It's just really marvelous just to see the outcome of what I see with my students after they took my class.
Yeah, the story that when you first shared that you had this assignment at the beginning of the class, it sounds like early on to kick off of, this is my story, and so many people before me have had the same story. And that was one of the stories that was really heartwarming for me, and why I wanted to talk about this in front of so many others for a webinar, is as you shared there, the impact that it had on students in a time when over the last year, so many students were just mindlessly going on to Zoom and maybe having their camera off, and so many of us were lecturing to just talking to a bunch of black boxes. You were able to have an experience that students were declaring majors inside of chemistry, inside of STEM, based on the design and how you had set up your course, which that's just so incredible. And I want to take a moment here to ask all you at home, thinking about the work that, Cord had a support network that inspired him and encouraged him to go into chemistry, and now he's helping others. I want to ask everyone here, who was your mentor in science? Who really ignited that passion for you? For myself, not quite in science, but one of the first instructors who really believed in me was my math teacher in middle school, Mrs. Vogel. She was one who really believed in me in a way that I hadn't had anyone believe in me quite that way before, and encouraged me that I had the skill set to go and pursue a degree in physics later on. So we see a Mrs. Pennington here. I think that's we'll go over it in Q&A in a moment here, but just reflecting on who helped us and who inspired us and who was our mentor that brought us into this field.
Thank you, Ms. Pennington, for mentoring one of the audience members.
Yeah. High school biology, animal behavior.
Wow.
Your parents,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. My mom really helped me, so.
Yeah, my parents took me. I grew up in Maine, and so when I was a child in Acadia National Park in Sand Beach, they used to have a nighttime viewing of the night sky, and so I'd go there and look up at the stars, and that combined with Carl Sagan earlier on really got me quite excited. But having these educators, physics teacher Mr. Dwyer, go physics. Not too many here. I know we're chemistry here, but thank you all for sharing. Bill Nye, great. Bill Nye. Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing here. We went a little over the time. We wanted to leave time for questions, for thoughts that you had after we're reflecting on what we've done, what we're here as educators to do to help inspire the next generation of scientists. So wanted to start out here and go in and see questions. Okay. I teach general biology and environmental science. What options are available with Labster? Cord, I'll take this one real quick. I have more experience in the biology and environmental science. Plenty. There are many examples, probably within your state and within your system, of introductory and general biology and environmental science, whether it's ecology or evolution courses as well. There's a whole suite of topics. Our marketing team, our email will be after this, but our full catalog is available online. I encourage you not only to look at that, but reach out to your local representative so that way you can actually have a demo and you can get your hands on and try them out for yourself. Next question, doesn't look like a question, but Cord, I'll read it here. Cord, it seems like you have a natural gift for motivating your students. I have no doubt that your students will someday say that you were their mentor, so thanks for what you do. Not really a question there, but I have to reiterate that it has been so good working with you over the last year and hearing these success stories. So thanks for that, Cord.
You're welcome. I'm really thankful for the invite to share my story of how I bridged the achievement gaps.
Absolutely. We'll leave time for any other questions. These questions might be related to creative ways to use Labster or other tools. Maybe it's pedagogy, maybe it's course design, maybe it's instructional methods, anything else that Cord was able to come in and see such dramatic improvements in grades. Sometimes people are thinking and typing, and it takes a little bit to come in.
So I'd like to add one thing. I actually forgot to mention this in my natural science course. So at the end of the semester in that course, I actually encourage students to present on a drug of their interest. And so what they did was they did like a oral presentation. And what they did was they look at like different drugs that they took it personally, or they know somebody that took it before. And what they did was they talk about the history of the drug, how the drug was developed, was these pharmacokinetics, which means like how the drug getting administrated, how it getting distributed in the body, and what the metabolism and excretion, and also the toxicity. And one thing I did after they did some research on what was known about the drug, like the publications, whether it's basic science or clinic, I asked them how does this apply to their field? Because of what I noticed, a lot of times they think, oh, I'm a film major. What can I do with what does that have to do with me or art or English majors,
or cooking, or whatever. Yeah.
And they realize that everything relates to science, and science relates to the non-STEM majors. And after they did it, one of my students actually presented at the honors conference this past fall on his presentation. And so I was pretty excited that my student was brave enough to present at the honors conference as well on the drug of interest.
That's awesome, and that's again the same theme that we've been talking: applications, seeing how this works, meeting students where they are, helping them see how it works. So I think there's two questions here. One that just came in: how can I learn more about how to teach with Labster, and also how can I find out which Labsters you used? I'm going to guess that's with the simulations. I think our next slide will answer both those questions. If you want to find out more about Labster, our marketing team can get all the materials you need and direct you to your local representative, whatever that representative might be. That's on the screen here, marketing@labster.com. If you have any questions for Cord directly, he wanted everyone here to have access to his information. He's now at, let me make sure I get it right, the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. Can you still hear me?
Yes, so I can hear you now.
Okay, great. If you want to reach out to Cord, Cord is now completing his PhD. That is his email on the screen if you want to reach out to him. That's a Labster contact, and that's Cord's contact information. He stressed, please reach out with any questions you have for him.
Yes, please. I always check my emails every day. So if you have any questions about the pedagogy that I use in my courses, please reach out, and we can schedule a Zoom meeting, wherever the case may be, to answer your questions.
Excellent. Cord, thank you again. This has been a pleasure. I was very excited to be able to share these stories because they've been inspiring for me, and I know inspiring for others at Labster that have heard them, and I hope that this is helping other educators that there's science students this year returning to whatever this fall is going to look like, and we're going to have a way to make sure that those students are coming in and having that same experience and feeling like they can do this. So thanks again, Cord, for your time, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ben, for the invitation to share my experience and my story.